Hello, Arthur.
Well,
All right, so we'll wait a few more moments for the bingo players to regroup. Oh my gosh, Connie, every day, huh?
Listen, I'm downsizing.
Hey, I'm not standing in your way. Oh, and I was reading this. Oh, this is a different one. I love I wanted to read that book, the Colarasso book. It sounded so interesting. Thank you. Oh, this looks great. Eminent British poets of the 19th century. Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful.
It has a Simmons sticker on it,
Oh,
which I couldn't take off.
that's okay.
So it dates from about 1947,
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
48, maybe.
That's great. Connie Stampler, there she is. Oh, and it was put together by the professor at Smith.
So difficult.
Amazing.
yeah, I could get it.
Well, I figured every day you have another offering.
Exactly.
Should be an unending story.
This is great.
Oh, okay.
Surprised by joy, impatient as the wind, I turned to share the transport. Oh, with whom? But thee, deep buried in the silent tomb, that spot which no vicissitude can find. Love, my faithful love, recalled thee to my mind. But how could I forget thee? Through what power, even for the least division of an hour, have I been so beguiled as to be blind to my most grievous loss? That thought's return was the worst pang that sorrow ever bore. Save one only, when I stood forlorn, knowing my heart's best treasure was no more. That neither present time nor years unborn could to my sight that heavenly face restore. Sad. That was Wordsworth. Lovely. Thank you so much. Okay. Oh, we lost Shanti. All
Yeah.
right. Shanti, are you still here? Oh, she is. Oh, good. Ah, there we go.
I'm still here.
Oh, there you are. Okay, you were sideways for a minute. Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, Mickey. Did you get my email yesterday? I sent an email to you, but I don't know if I had the right address.
When did you send it?
Yesterday afternoon.
I haven't checked my email.
Okay. Is it Mickey Mort?
I checked them in the morning.
Got it.
I did check.
You did, but you didn't see one from me from yesterday.
No, I only checked it in the morning.
Yeah, I sent it yesterday afternoon. Okay.
I'll check.
Okay. All right, so I think we'll get started here. And oh, this television is going to need to be replaced. I can see. All right, so I think we'll wait. We'll wait. As, you know, if Zahava is joining us or going to the gym.
What do I do when I read this? I'm already.
What if you're already old? What do you do?
What do I do? Should I leave and
Come back reborn?
Yeah.
You could do it. I mean, or you can argue. You can say that he's wrong, that, you know, you should do things your way. I think one of the very interesting things about this article, and actually I think we'll assume that this is everybody, and if anyone else who wants to come in, they will have to push the door open. Because the a little distracting what's going on outside. All right, so welcome everybody. It's exciting to see you all today. So this is interesting. I saw this book at the library, and it's one of those books that I immediately sort of on one hand was interested in, and on the other hand was kind of put off by it. Because it's called Stupid Things I Won't Do when I get old.
Oh, give me the list.
Yes, because now that you're old, Ruth, you need to know all the stupid things you're doing. Yes.
No more, I did
Or
already.
that you did already. It's too late. I did them. Yes. And I was saying, and we did this, Jacob and I were over at Cohen and we were saying there seems to be some sort of thing in the publishing world of having these slightly off-putting titles for books. And somehow that seems to be a marketing decision. The other thing about this book that, just to get all of my complaints out right away, is that everything here is couched in the negative, right? That I won't do this, right? Even things that really are, I'm going to do this or that or the other thing, right? He couches that I won't let anyone make it so I can't do the thing I want to do. And so so I think it probably was an editorial marketing kind of decision. I disagree with it. With that kind of exception, a couple of weeks back, Connie gifted me a 2-volume set of books, The Jewish Commandments. You may think there are 10. You would be wrong. There are 613, right? One of the great things about there being 613 commandments. So what's true of the 10 commandments, which there's no full agreement on what actually constitutes, the first commandment, the second commandment. By the time you get to the third or the fourth, it's kind of clear that they're separate commandments, but where to put the beginning and the end of the various commandments. But no one can completely agree on what the 613 are. So there's various versions of these books, the 613 commandments. But one thing that unites them all is that there are 248, I think, positive commandments. These are the things you should do. And then the rest of them are the negative commandments. These are the things you shouldn't do. The problem with this book is it's all things you shouldn't do. Even things that you should do, it's pretending that you shouldn't do them. So anyway, so I don't love that, but the book is actually a lot better than its title, I have to say. So Stephen Petro, this is what he looks like. Stephen Petro is here. Shanti, I'm going to put stuff up on the screen in a minute, so everyone else will be able to see him for now. But just give me a second. So it's this man here. Okay, he's being interviewed in this video by this other guy. We won't look at that right now, unless you guys feel strongly that you want to. But I think that it's more fun to just lives in Virginia, I think.
Oh.
Yeah. So what I propose to do for this is the way we did it in the last session, and I'm very open to not doing it exactly this way. But what I thought we would do is we would read the article that he wrote in the New York Times. As you can see, he wrote it a couple of years ago, and that article turned into this book. This book is an offshoot of a Jewish genre of writing, which is not only Jewish, obviously, but it's, I'm familiar with it in the Jewish context of what's called an ethical will, right? The idea that you don't just, when you die, you don't just pass on your belongings, right? You also pass on some of your experiences, some of your wisdom, right? Some of your advice, even, so to speak, to the upcoming generations. This book is kind of that, but it started as kind of an ethical will to himself, right? How am I going to learn from the lessons that I'm seeing in my parents and in their generation, things that I don't think are working very well for them, and how am I going to try to behave differently when I get to that age, so that things are easier for me, things are easier for the people around me, so on and so forth. But it ends up being, of course, in book form. He doesn't talk about having kids, so he's not obviously going to give it to his kids, but anyone who reads it has the opportunity. It also sort of turns into a memoir, which is so I actually do recommend the book because I think I haven't read the whole thing, but bits and pieces I've read, and they're very nice. So, and then what I thought we could do is we could go through his list, and we could, obviously, we don't know the story behind all of all the reasons for the various things that he does. Each one has a story attached to it. But then we could read one or two of the stories. And if I have more luck than I did at Cohen, which I doubt I will, I can actually put them up on the screen. But I think I can't because it's a long story. It's technical, and I don't understand it. But I think because I put it up on my screen in the office, I can't put it up on my screen here. So, okay. So things I'll do differently when I'm old. All right, so Shanti, I'll put this up on the screen so you can see it too. Oh, we have Florence with us. Hello, Florence.
Hi,
It's great to see you.
nice to see you.
Don't you hate this?
I don't know how to get rid of this.
Oh, someone's with Florence. Is that Laura?
Nope, it's Amanda.
Oh, hi, Amanda.
Hi.
Great to
Okay.
see you. Sorry, I misrecognized you at first.
No, that's okay. Don't worry. All right, so I'm gonna put her on mute.
Okay, sounds good. All right, good deal. All right, so things I'll do differently when I'm old. Soon after my 50th birthday, 10 years ago, I started keeping a list of things I will do, things I won't do when I get old. It was a highly judgmental and super secret accounting of all the things I thought my parents were doing wrong. Right? What happens in families, right? I don't like what my parents are doing. I've had enough fights with them that I'm going to write down this list, and I'm not going to show it to them because, God forbid, they'll be angry with me or embarrassed or whatever. It was highly, right, I said that. My dad lied chronically about taking his meds. He refused to get a hearing aid, telling others to up their audio. He had been a television producer. My mom smoked behind my back, she thought, until the day she was diagnosed with lung cancer. It was all too easy to call them out. And I recognized over and over again just how awful it is to become feeble, sick, and increasingly absent-minded or worse. So, and again, as I said over at Cohen, yes, it can be terrible, right? But it can also just be, it can be something you can accept and deal with, and with grace and humor. And so maybe you don't need to lie about these things all the time. But obviously in his family, that was not an option. And so he didn't like that. Over the next decade, I accumulated many pages of do's and don'ts. And I've noticed at one point I had an assignment to put together an ethical will for my kids. And I found that I couldn't stop adding to it. There was just more and more sort of ideas I had, advice I would never give them, when they were alive, because it would be annoying. But, after I was dead, they could read if they wanted. Even as I fretted about exactly when I'd be old enough to start following my own advice, based on Ruth, we're never going to be old enough to do it.
Oh, good.
Right.
I want to live forever.
Right, exactly. So why do I need to pay attention to this advice? I'm gonna live forever. Recently, I heard a sociologist on the radio call people in their early 60s the young old. I imagine that my young adult nieces might consider me old already, but I don't really feel ready to start taking my own advice. I'm still working on building lists, not implementing it, right? That's many of us, right? We have lots of advice for people who are older than us, right? But that's not for us. That's not for me. This is for the older people. The entries on my list reflect my frustration of seeing the price my parents paid for their stubbornness. Take my mother's terrifying driving, for instance. A growing number of fender benders and worse didn't faze her, and she would not listen of any talk of her fading ability behind the wheel. Right. In the interview that I put on the list, it talked about how every time there was a fender bender, it was always the other person's fault. Right. Never her, she was never responsible for any of her accidents. In desperation, I reported my mom to the DMV, and they called her in for a road test. She failed it, and her license was revoked. It humiliated mom and tormented me. Right. But he says in the video, he says that she never suspected that it was actually him.
He never suspected what?
She never suspected that it was actually him that called her in. She thought it was just the cops. So here's how it appears on my list. If my driving capability is questioned, I will not reject the comment out of hand because I am afraid of losing my independence. I hope there will be self-driving cars by then. If nothing else works, I hope someone else will turn me in. Very interesting. Actually, I saw a graphic in an article the other day that suggests that in 20 or 30 years, we will have an increase in the life expectancy in this country because self-driving cars will be fully implemented and there'll be many fewer deaths on the roadways. But I thought to myself, there's going to be many more people on the road. So even with self-driving cars, will there then be more accidents because it's just volume? I don't know. So we'll see. But hopefully there'll be fewer accidents. My biggest worry as I watched my parents grow old was their increasing physical frailty. Who hasn't heard that hip fractures from falls are a leading cause of death among the elderly? I know my father had heard it, if only because we talked about it with him ad nauseum. I pointed out the consequences of his own mother's pride in refusing a cane or walker. At age 84, Grandma fell while riding the New York City subway alone, and that fall led over the months that followed to her death. Right? We all know people that have gone that way. After literally hundreds of falls, none of which persuaded him to accept help or to use a walker, Dad at 87 finally came down hard and broke 4 ribs. That accident jump-started the slide that led to his death. I asked myself, will my self-awareness triumph over my apparently genetic stubbornness? Right? Yeah, go ahead.
There's an assumption made that he's making an assumption that his parents would have wanted it any other way.
Right.
Maybe she wanted to
Right.
be able to read the New York Times before her death. That would be the thing. And there's some humor to it, and that's okay. And the same thing goes with her father, with his father, that maybe it was more important for him to keep his independence.
Right.
And die a little earlier. I mean, how long can you live? I mean, I know that's a tough question, but I think it's a question
Right.
we all have to ask. And what is the quality of life? Sounds like the both of them had some stubbornness and some grit.
Yes. Right. And
it wasn't affecting. I'm not talking about the driving.
the driving, right? The driving is in a different category, right? Because you're putting other people in danger, and so.
Yeah.
But the smoking, and although now, of course, smoking, like if you smoke in anyone else's presence, right, you're clearly affecting them as well. But the refusing to use a walker, right? Exactly. At a certain point, it is that. And I do the other thing, and I think that this question is really an important one that he asked, right? Will my self-awareness triumph over my apparently genetic stubbornness? But I don't think it's actually just stubbornness, right? I also think that, over the years, people change their minds about things, right? And very often someone will say, when they're well, right, I don't want to be revived in the hospital, right? And then they get to the hospital and they ask, do you want to be revived? Yes, I want to be revived, right? I mean, so it's people are not consistent in general. right? And so there is but I do think, right, that asking the question is important, right? And it sounds to me like both of his parents, it's not just that they were stubborn, right? They were also not really necessarily willing to reflect on these questions, right? And again, you can't force someone to be reflective, right? It's that's up to them. It's not up to you. But we ourselves can make up our own minds about how we want to manage these things. So what's on my list, right, is what I told my dad time and again. I'll try to remember that the best way to stay independent is to accept smaller degrees of dependence or assistance. I'll use a walker rather than fall and break bones, right? And so he's already defining independence slightly differently, right? He's saying, I am actually going to be independent because I'm going to use a walker, right? As opposed to insisting that the only way to remain independent is to walk without an assistive device, right? Thus risking a larger loss of independence. Again, people may have different opinions about this. Yeah, go ahead.
Don't you think that also has to do with the kind of society you're part of? I mean, I don't have anyone who would question whatever I do, except my two daughters.
That's a pretty big except Ruth.
That had nothing to do with walkers or anything.
Yeah,
It has to do with who you are hobnob with.
interesting. Right. So I do think that's true, right? And clearly, as it turns out, right, this guy has two siblings.
Yeah.
Right. And so his parents, have three kids and
they have a society.
right. And by the time they died, two in-laws, two kid in-laws, this guy was divorced already by the time his parents died, so yeah, I mean, but you also have the people around you, right? Everyone in this room has made the decision to move into this building, right? Supportive housing, as opposed to living, say, in an apartment with no services, whatever, so on and so forth. So each person makes their own decision about how they're going to manage these changes as you get older and older.
But this building is terrific because it's right on the street. And you can walk and you could go up and down, or you could go someplace. It's really a terrific building.
Right. And I've also heard, Ruth, though, that it's not a terrific building because it's on a hill. And, you go out and you're on a hill and it's a real pain, especially.
Where is the hill?
So right here,
Oh.
the back, yeah. Although even Beacon Street's a little bit of a hill. I mean, it's not completely flat. Yeah.
I'll have to find the hill.
All right. So a friend of mine put it this way: I will use a walker so I don't fall, even when it wrecks my outfit. And we were saying, someone in the other building was saying, he says designer walkers, anyone. The other person was saying, canes are so unattractive. We have to get back to beautiful canes, right? It used to be that canes were kind of a fashion accessory, right? Let's find canes that are beautiful, not the metal ones that look like they came, that they were, fashioned from a crutch. Right? All right. So I'll admit that vanity drives a number of my do's and don'ts. Yeah. Right. And vanity is a real thing, right? And it's an important thing. Being comfortable with the way you look is a big part of being comfortable with the way you feel, right? Yeah. So about 8 years ago, I wrote, or about 8 years in, I wrote, I will not blame the family dog on my lap for my incontinence. I will choose the humiliation of wearing adult diapers over the humiliation of wetting my bed and having someone else clean the sheets. For years, my dad chose the latter. Heck, maybe I'll even grow in my self-acceptance so I won't view incontinence as a humiliation, right? It's just a part of where I am in my life, and it's, and I just have to make the appropriate shifts to deal with it. Right? I also want to maintain some style. Right until the end, my mother, who died earlier this year, continued to have her hair styled and colored, and her manicured nails painted her trademark jungle red. I wrote, if I can't take care of my personal grooming anymore, I will find help. If I don't care about my personal grooming anymore, I will find different help. At the very least, I want to be clean and smell fresh like mom, so people sit by me and hold my hand, right? This is very important to him, that people sit with him and hold his hand. So yeah, go ahead, Connie.
On the 5 wishes, that's a big part.
Yes,
Do I want to, yes or no, do I want to be clean yet or not?
right.
Which I thought was such an interesting question.
It is an interesting question because it never would occur to me,
Yes,
right, that it would be a question.
because it's a question
Yeah.
on the list.
But I do think it is a question. I do think there are people for whom it's a less important priority than it is for other people.
I didn't get that priority. What is it?
Of being clean, of staying clean.
Americans always want to be clean.
For the most part, that is true. For the most part, it's not true in every culture, but it's certainly true. But it is very interesting because in the book, right, but between the time that he wrote this article,
Yeah.
talking about how his mother cleaned and styled her hair, I'm sorry, colored and styled her hair. The first chapter in the book is, I will not color my hair anymore, even though it works, the line here is, even though it works for Diane Sawyer, right, it doesn't work for him, right? And that's one of the, I could read, we can read selected chapters. I'm happy to read that chapter if you'd like. But I also think like COVID happened between when this was written and now, right? And a lot of people who used to color their hair no longer do. I've noticed a lot, especially it's somehow even more noticeable with women than it is with men. But a colleague of mine stopped coloring her hair, and when I hadn't seen her, and when I saw her on Zoom, it took me a couple of looks to sort of recognize, oh, that's this person. And I thought she looked so much better with her hair natural than with the color. But which I actually think in general, people look, really good with their natural hair, but everyone has to make their own decision about that. I, of course, look very good with my natural hair. So since everyone can see it. Whitened teeth is also on my list. A friend of mine has this entry on her list: wear pants that touch the tops of my shoes at least. It was very interesting, even though high water pants seem to be back in style. My list also acknowledges my quickness to anger, which is the trait I shared with both parents. A year before mom's death, her aide repeatedly asked her to do some post-surgical breathing exercise prescribed by the oncologist, but which she hated doing because they were challenging. One afternoon, mom, in deep frustration, lashed out at the aide using language I'm too embarrassed to repeat. And I was the one who took the aide's call of justified complaint. Onto my list went, if I'm hurt or angry by what's happening to me or my body, I will do my best not to take it out on those who are closest to me, right? Which is a really important one, very, very difficult to remember, right? When you're in pain, when you are frustrated, when you're angry about something, it's very common to lash out at others. There's so many people among our PCAs, the personal care assistants and certified nursing assistants in Roslindale and in Newbridge, and I'm sure it happens here as well, where language that you would not generally use suddenly comes out of your mouth, and it's hurtful as well as embarrassing. So remembering that can be very difficult, but I do think it's actually really important. I will be kind, and if you forget to be kind, I will apologize. Right? That can go a long way.
She's talking about 60.
He's only 60. He's a young man. He's younger than Jacob.
Oh, God.
As I march onward from 60, I continue to pay attention and maintain my list, but I remain mindful of what one friend told me. The important thing is to remember that no matter how much we tell ourselves we won't be like our parents, no matter how hard and how fast we run in the other direction, we become them. Please no, he says. He does not want that. Others of us might be more comfortable with that, right? I was talking with someone the other day who, for whom that would be the largest nightmare, right? And someone over at Cohen said, we even begin to look like our parents, even if we didn't look like them when we were younger. So often we do look like them when we get older. I don't know. Everyone always talks about how much my younger son looks like me. I feel so bad. Like it's really unpleasant for him. Luckily, he's a lot better looking than I am. So, but I do think there's certain things, right, that we sort of embody from our parents that we can't necessarily escape. So ironically, I have some guidance on that as well. My grandmother, the one who fell on the subway, once made a similar list, which I found among my father's papers. I guess they're list makers in this family. Hers included: do not fall, work on controlling forgetfulness, think before you speak, eat moderately and no rich desserts, do the best you can and learn by your errors. Right? It's a good idea. I mean, none of these is a bad thing to do, right? None of these.
But the most important is not to fall.
Yes, not to fall is very important. I agree. Right. I certainly hope to learn from her, but she was the one, right, who fell on the subway because she refused to use a cane or a walker. So clearly, not using those things was more important than not falling. And and again, as Mickey said, in that moment, right? I mean, I can certainly understand in the New York subway, using a walker in the New York subway, especially when she was active, must have really been a difficult thing to do, or probably even impossible. Who knows how many stations at that point had elevators? It's
all steps.
right. I mean, the ADA is not that recent, so it really was an impediment. Okay, I certainly hope to learn from her errors and my parents, and to avoid making too many of my own. And he doesn't say that he's going to learn from his own, but I have a feeling he probably already has. Mostly, I hope to be able to judge when to stop adding to the list and to start following its advice. All right, so he lives in North Carolina. I think I told the other group that he lives in Virginia, but that's wrong. All right. So Judy has joined us. Hello, Judy. All right. So comments, thoughts, complaints about this article, and then I thought we could read through the list and decide, is there one we'd like to read through, or just discuss them? So go ahead, Harriet.
Can't we take the best of our parents and just let the others be forgotten? I mean, our parents certainly had some wonderful things to give us. Can we take those?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and live by them, perhaps?
Right. Well, I mean, I think that's a really interesting question. What Harriet said was, can't we take what's best in our parents or from our parents, right? And then kind of forget the rest, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that's a reasonable thing to do. I think, does anyone have a response to that idea?
It's a good idea.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Well, I wonder if he's slightly exaggerating for the sake of his story, for one thing. I mean, it is pretty funny, actually, when you look at it and read it. So that would be my suspicion.
Yeah,
A little bit of exaggeration
Right.
in there.
Yeah, I think yes, and I think also, right, that he probably inherited a lot of wonderful traits from his father. Was a television producer, but also a journalist and a journalism professor. So obviously he caught the writing bug, in part from his father. I don't remember what his mother did professionally, but my sense is that to sort of that he doesn't want to forget the less positive aspects of his parents, because he wants to learn from them, right? Just as he wants to learn from the more positive aspects of his parents' life, right? He also wants to learn from the places where he disagreed with his parents. right? And so if he thought that his parents were being reckless, right, in his mother's insistence upon driving when she really shouldn't be driving, many of us have parents like that, right? My mother no longer drives, right? And I don't know to what degree that was her decision or my father's decision. I was out with my father the other day and I was a little worried and like, am I going to have this talk with him? Luckily now they live in a place where they mostly walk, right? But these are, it occurs to me like, yes, you know, when, you know, do I want to be like my mother? I want to be like my, you know, I want to not put other people at risk by my driving. So at what point, right, do I decide that, okay, it's enough? And if I see in my, if like he saw in his father an unwillingness to use a walker or a cane, right? He wants to learn from that, not to emulate it, right? I think he likes being stubborn. I think he likes having a, maybe he doesn't like being quick to anger, but he's clearly a passionate guy, right? And he, you know, that's something he takes from his parents, and there's a little bit of pride there, right? And at the same time, right, that can lead to being hurtful to other people, and he doesn't want to do that. Does that make sense, Harriet? As a, you know, but I think Barbara is also correct, right? That as he says in the interview, he says these are not always easy topics, and so leading with humor. And one of the best ways to be humorous in a gentle way, right, is through exaggeration, and sort of making mountains out of molehills, you know, for comedic effect. Yeah, go ahead.
Our 3 kids meet on Zoom every Sunday night for an hour, and they discuss us. You're not free.
Are you ever invited?
No, no.
Oh, God.
No. This is their time, and it's not a fetching time. It's a time, will this happen to them this week? And should we do this? And can we really get a rug? Is it safe? Or they discuss all this. And then gently, very gently, they then speak to us individually with great love. And I think it's kind of fun, you know, what they think is important and what we think is important. And
is there a big gap in that perception of what's important?
well, Dan and I wanted to ski in the Olympics, but they wouldn't let us.
Oh,
So that's a big gap.
right. That is a big gap because I mean, I think the two of you are clearly, you know, medal contenders, and so it was really rude of them not to let you go.
It was all 3 of them. They made that decision.
Right.
It's wonderful. They wouldn't let us go. Wonderful.
I didn't get what you know, I don't hear well with a mask on.
Oh, yes. Well, you don't hear well with other people's masks on, is my guess. What she said was that her kids, their kids have a session every Sunday to discuss their parents and to sort of strategize about, you know, things that are happening, good things, bad things, and they have conversations after the fact. They don't let Harriet and Dan in on those conversations, but then they have conversations with them afterwards. And I asked, is there any time that there was a sort of a difference of opinion about, you know, what really matters? And she was complaining that they wouldn't let them go to the Olympics to ski. Yeah. Go ahead, Arthur.
I think what's telling about that is that the kids have to know what's going on, or they don't have anything to talk about.
Yes.
And if they don't live with you, that requires a lot of communication on your part,
right,
to share with them, because they're dependent on what you tell them in order to be helpful to you.
Yeah.
The emails are fast and furious. We
Right.
have a lot of emails that go back and forth.
I think it's a blessing.
that is a blessing. I mean, to have, but it's a blessing that requires a willingness on your part to be open and to share what's going on with you, right? And I think that a lot of people like to, you know, be a little bit more private. and this is actually, we sort of began to get on this topic at the last one. I don't want to burden my kids.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to burden my kids. And it's a very interesting question. At what point are you burdening them, right, with information? Or are you burdening them by hiding things?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that both TMI, right, too much information, and withholding information can in their own ways be a burden, right? And so the question is always going to be, well, how do you strike the right balance, right? Go ahead, Ruth.
And when you don't say something, I haven't had it happen yet, but with me and my children, with me and my parents, if you don't tell them, then you end up feeling guilty and it lasts much longer. The guilt.
The guilt on the kid's side.
Also on the
parent side. Yeah.
You want to be happy in this whole drama.
Go ahead, Eric.
Well, our kids burdened us for all their years. We had to know about the pimples on the face and the first menstruation. We had to go through all that with them. Well, now it's our time.
Right.
I think it's fair is fair.
Yeah. And then for those of us who don't have children, or whose parents are already gone, right? These are this type of a book, right, helps us think about, well, or if our kids aren't really in our lives that way, right? Not everybody has a steering committee that meets on a weekly basis and tells you what to do. I mean, that's great, but not every family works that way, right? And so there are families, and not everybody has kids, right? So to try to think about some of these questions without kids, right? This is where a book like this. I mean, there's many books like this. But this one just happens to have a particularly snarky title, and it's written with good humor, so it makes the pill go down. Miriam, do you want to say something?
Oh, no.
Okay,
No, thank you.
all right. Go ahead, Connie.
So Marty and I used to meet religiously with his sibs to discuss where to place his parents when the time came.
I didn't hear, I couldn't understand.
So we used to meet with Marty Sibbs to discuss where to place his parents when the time came, how to help them make the decision.
Right.
Yeah, and we had to consult with the geriatric social worker from the BI to help us help them.
Yeah.
You mean where to bury them?
No, where to house them.
Oh, yeah, that's important.
It is, and not every, and this is one of those questions of burdening,
Yeah.
right? Because some people are so focused on their independence.
And guilt.
Well, I mean, if it's Jews or Catholics, right? There's going to be guilt. It just kind of goes with the territory. But wanting to stay at home, right? Wanting to home, meaning whatever the house was that you had when you raised your kids, right? That is, I struggled for many years. My parents were living in a place that was not appropriate for them. And it was actually interesting. I got nowhere with them, but my son was very effective and he did it in this very interesting way because he pushed them to go look at other apartments.
Yes.
And he found the apartments and we started going on. And so now they live in a place that's all on one floor. And the difference is astounding. It's just amazing how much better their life is. But thanks to Moses, right, for making that thing. But at what point would it have actually become a burden on me and my sister to have them in this house? I don't really know, right? There were so many stairs, and it was impossible for my father. Now there's an elevator, so it's this great thing. But and then on the other hand, right, as we said, sometimes trying to remain independent so as not to be a burden, right, means that you end up being a burden. All right, so here's the list of and again, try to hear these, they're all stated negatively. I won't this, I won't that, but many of them are actually positive, right? They're just rewritten so that, and I'm happy to read, one or more. I don't know if I probably can't we'll do more, but maybe I could read one. So I won't color my hair, right? I'm going to ignore this one because it's meaningless. I won't be afraid to fall, which he doesn't mean literally to fall. He means that he won't be afraid to fail. He won't be afraid to try new things and to fail in the process of learning new things. Right. I won't be afraid. I won't stop rocking those too young for you outfits. Right. So I can really appreciate that. My kids used to complain that I wore the wrong kind of pants or these crazy shoes. Now well, my younger one at least. I don't think my older one likes it. I won't limit myself to friends my own age, right? Having friends of across the age range. I won't lie about my age. I won't join the organ recital, which means that just sort of getting together and fetching about things that are going wrong, right? I won't deny that I'm slow to rise, right? Slow down a little bit. And I'm okay with it. It's fine. It's one of the things about getting older. I won't avoid looking at myself naked in the mirror, right? Which I think is an important piece of, he has a particular story about that, having to do not with age so much, but with the after effects of a big surgery. I won't become a miserable malcontent, a cranky curmudgeon, or a surly sourpuss, right? And there are many people in this room whom I look at as wonderful examples of that. I won't pass up a chance to pee, even if I don't have to yet.
Say that again.
I won't pass up a chance to pee, which is very important at least as men, as you get older. Like if you have a chance, take it because those prostates are not great. Yeah. I won't lie to my doctor anymore because those lies can kill me, right? There are people who have never lied to their doctor, and there are people who used to, or maybe still do. I don't recommend it. I won't refuse to change my ways. I won't tell my life story when someone asks, "How are you?"
Oh, that's terrible.
All right. I won't get my knickers in a twist at OK Boomer. That one you might not understand. This is an internet kind of a thing where young people were getting fed up with people, boomers, baby boomers lecturing them, and so they would say, "Okay, boomer." I won't be honest to a fault when lying is kinder. I won't worry about what I can't control, and I won't stop believing in magic. In his case, it has to do with a terrible disease he had, and he sort of had this. He had sort of this idea that it was going to get better, even though there was no way to prove that it would. But he feels that kind of positive thinking was helpful for him.
I had a sick husband for a long time, and I kept saying this mantra: I have to do a good job. I have to do a good job. I didn't say it to him, but I said it in my head, and that helped.
Yes. That's very interesting. I have to do a good job.
Yeah.
And that helping, right? It's sort of, what it makes me think of, right, is that this is a way, this is sort of my mission in my life right now. And this is something I can do for another person.
Yes.
And it is remarkable, I think, when you can combine those two things, right? Something that gives your life meaning and something that you're doing for another person.
You have a mission.
Right. Those two things can be hugely empowering.
Yeah.
And can make even otherwise unpleasant tasks much more pleasant. Right.
Well, I wouldn't say pleasant, unhappiness.
Right. They can make unhappiness a little bit more bearable.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So those are all things that he's talking about in his life right now.
Yeah.
When he gets a little older, he says, "I'm not going to blame my dog for my leaky pipes." Right. If I'm incontinent was my own thing. I have to accept it. right? I won't keep driving when I become a threat to other people. I won't stop enjoying myself. That one I really like, right? I will not stop enjoying myself, right? And I will have the occasional candy bar. I will treat myself to things that I enjoy,
Yeah.
right? I think that's really, really important, right? I won't hoard the butter pats. I used to work at Marshall Fields in Chicago. I lived for a year in Chicago, and I got a job during the Christmas season. I got a job as a waiter at the restaurant in Marshall Fields, and it was a buffet. And there were all these older ladies that would come in, and they would put the butter pats and the sugar packs into their purses.
Oh, yeah.
And I, and so he's not going to be that person.
Can I want to comment on that little thing. There are so many things in there.
Yes.
Make a lot of sense, but that are difficult. But the sugar thing, at least I can address because it's a very small.
Yes.
I think that some people, we have to understand that some people feel they have to do that.
Right.
They have a great anxiety
Yes.
of not having enough.
Right.
And without even looking at their background, that may also come with age. Like I might not be able to make it to the supermarket this week.
Right.
Or I may not be able to.
Well, or it may just be sort of a sense of food insecurity,
I think so.
right? That manifests itself in inappropriate behavior. And I think that that's what he's talking about, right? I mean, my sense, right, that when I was working at Marshall Fields, this was not new behavior. I was not the first person to notice this. They actually trained us in it, right? And, when to call the person out on it, when not to, right? I mean, I used to work when I was a kid. I worked at a grocery store. And I remember, without meaning to at all, I caught an older woman stealing frozen entrees, like Weight Watchers types of things. And I was so shocked, I didn't even know what to do with it. So I just backed off. But it was very interesting. I mean, I always associated that when I was younger. So this was in the 80s and early 90s, right, with the generation that had grown up in the Depression. But I don't know. It's 50 years later, right? Or not 50 years, but it's many years later now. So most of those people are no longer around. So it's probably not that anymore. So it might be just a sort of a feeling of food insecurity.
People have different kinds of anxiety.
Right, exactly. Exactly. But I think, again, the point from his perspective, right, is to recognize that in myself, right?
Yeah.
And to behave in a different, is to recognize the anxiety, right? And not to behave that way, right? And I think the other thing, right, is that it's in this sort of category of, like we have thoughts about doing all kinds of stuff, right? We are often tempted, right? We often have a thought about, being very upset or wanting to take this or have this or whatever. And it's okay, it's okay. Everybody has those thoughts, right? But we don't have to act on those thoughts, right? We don't have to act like, oh, I really want that. I really want that chocolate or whatever it is. But I don't need to act on it, right?
Again, I can share, and this is such a little thing, but it's kind of typical. One of my sons was up here last weekend with his kids, and my other son is here. When my son was, the one who was visiting was talking with me, we're joking around. I told him that sometimes I have a fantasy of, I'm just going to go to the airport. I'm going to take a cab. I am going to the airport and I'm just going to fly to Israel. Oh, just like that on the next flight. that got translated into, because my kids also discuss me now. Freeway. My other son wasn't there. My son called me and said, look, Mom, we're really worried. We think you're going to the airport to fly to Israel. It was so clear with David that it was
a thought.
a thought, but I wouldn't do that.
Right.
I can't afford to do
Right,
that.
right. Right.
But in the translation,
right.
I had all three kids very anxious. I know I'm somewhat impulsive, so I guess
Yeah.
that has to do with it. And they saw me just go on.
Well, I mean, and this is what's, I think, we all have all kinds of impulses all the time. And so when someone comes to you and shares an impulse they had, it's useful to say, oh, do you have a plan? Do you have a plan to do that? How likely it is it, do you think they'll actually do that? Because people have all, if we reacted hysterically to every single crazy thought we had, right, we would never do anything, because we would constantly be reacting to all these crazy thoughts.
Yeah.
It's very common among elderly, and it's built in to the stores or the cafes, to their bottom line.
Yeah, right. Right. We were, at Marshall Fields, we built that into the price. Everyone else had to pay a little more so that, so this one or that one could walk away with an extra piece of cheesecake. What the cheesecake looked like when it got home at the bottom of the lady's bag, I don't know, but
It tasted good though.
I'm sure it tasted great. All covered with, smushed with, with lint and dimes and pocket change, but whatever. All right, so just to finish up, I won't wait until I'm deaf to get a hearing aid. I won't burden my family with taking care of me. I won't let a walker ruin my style, but I'll still use it. I won't smell like a decrepit old man. I won't whine about how much things cost. I won't play the age card. I won't forget my manners, which I think is a good one. I won't be, this one I don't know, I'm not sure about this one. I won't be ordering the early bird special. I think,
Doesn't exist.
You didn't live in.
he didn't live in Florida. He lives in North Carolina, not in Florida, right? But I can tell you that's a big difference between my parents and my mother's sister. Because my mother's sister is a committed orderer of the early bird special, and my mother hates it. So it's that's I think is a personal preference. I won't repeat stories more than 100 times. I will not be unkind to people with dementia, which I think is really important, right? Because what I've noticed, not so much in this community, but I've noticed in other communities, is that people who are afraid of becoming afflicted with dementia are often the most impatient with people who already have gone into that mode. And so I think it is really important to remember. I found here in this community for people to be extremely patient and gracious with one another, which is amazing. I won't let anyone treat me with disrespect, and I won't lose my balance, which I think is related to the
And I won't what?
lose my balance.
That's impossible.
Mentally,
No, I mean, I think my sense is that, I don't know, I didn't read that one, so I don't know exactly what it means, but I assume that it has to do with life. Like I'm gonna keep my life in balance. But I don't know, I didn't read it, so I can't tell you exactly what it means. I won't, so then these are the things that he's worried about for the end of his life, when he comes to the end. I won't depart this life without someone holding my hand, right? Very important to know, like, how is it that, in as much as you can imagine it, how will I want to die? Do I want to, many people like to die by themselves. Other people want to be literally surrounded by people. Other people want to be surrounded, but they want them all to go away, so they can die in peace by themselves, right? This person wants to have someone holding his hand when it happens. I won't let anything stop me from saying I love you and goodbye. Right? There, for many people, not again for everybody, it's very important to be able to say goodbye to people, even if it's a false alarm. So like say goodbye and I love you early and often, right? I won't postpone for tomorrow what matters to me today, right? If you've gotten to a certain point in your life, right? Do what you want to do, right? He says he won't let anyone else write his obituary. That's one where I don't really care. Like, you know, I don't need to control what people say about me after I can't control what they say about me now. So, so after I'm dead, forget it. I won't forget to plan my own funeral, right? Another thing where it's hard for me to imagine that it would really matter to me. But on the other hand, there are certain people for whom it's really important. I want this music to be played at my funeral. I want this poem to be read at my funeral. I don't tend to be a planner in that regard. So I won't die without writing letters to my loved ones. In a sense, I think this book is sort of that already, right? And finally, I won't be disappointed by my life, which I think is a really interesting one, right? Is that he's gonna do his best to live in a way, right, where he won't feel like he has a lot of regrets that he could have controlled, right? It's one thing to be sad about things that happened that you couldn't control, and that makes sense, but things that he could have controlled, he doesn't want to be, he doesn't want to feel regret.
No bitterness.
Right, he doesn't want to be bitter at the end, right? And so he's resolved, right? He's resolved not to be bitter at the end of his life, right? Which I think is a good, whatever, it's a good resolution to make. So anyway, I actually do recommend the book if you want to grab it from the library. It's too much to read. I can't read you the whole thing, obviously, in now 0 minutes. So who wants the final thought? Because we're at time. It's at 4. We're actually 3 minutes past time because I was looking at this clock. Any final thoughts?
Many of those things require the capacity to accomplish it.
Right, which suggests, right, that thinking about it now, right, as opposed to putting it off, makes sense. Whatever the capacity you're at now, right, now is the time to begin thinking about some of these questions. What is it that I want? Yeah, go, Nimby, you want to say something?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because a lot of this I absolutely don't relate to in the slightest. So, but one thing I know I'm grateful for is that I don't have kids, and that I'm grateful for the choices I've made in my life, because I have a very strong friendship network. And the good thing about that is that we're all in the same place.
Right.
We don't have to negotiate differences.
Right.
And that kind of.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And that was kind of the question that I was getting at with Harriet, right? Is that very often it's not a matter really of the younger people being right about stuff and the older people being wrong, right? It really is a matter of priorities and having and context, which is a function of being at different places in your life. Right. And so there is something I think that could be very powerful about having a support network where everyone is sort of on the same page, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Connie.
I think it would be interesting to see if the residents here have the 5 wishes. I don't remember when I got it. It came from here, but I don't know about new people, etc. I think it's a valuable experience.
Yeah.
And in light of that, I think it would be a valuable experience for people to discuss what an ethical will is in detail with consults.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly
think about that.
I'm certainly happy to bring ethical, to bring ethical wills and to do a kind of exercise where, where we can begin the process of writing one.
I never heard of an ethical will.
Yeah. No, it's an ancient genre, and there's books that have them, so it won't be hard for me to find. Yeah. Okay. Oh, you've got one. Oh, good.
By Jack Rima?
Oh, yes, right, of course. Yeah. Right. And obviously this guy you know, he's a gay guy in his 60s who lives in North Carolina, and you know, he has a particular, you know, perspective on things. He obviously comes from a very well-to-do background, so on and so forth. There's all kinds of particularity about him, right? And so not all of the things that he has decided are important for him, right, clearly are going to be important for everybody else, right? And that's
What's his name?
his name is Stephen Petrow, Petrow, right? But you know, and again, I don't think that I don't get from him sort of a strong sense that this book is prescriptive in the particulars, maybe about the don't drive if you're going to kill someone else, maybe that's prescriptive, right? But most of it, I think, is that these are questions that are worth considering and deciding about, rather than just sort of living through. Go ahead.
Did his parents know he was gay?
Yeah, as far as I know, yeah. Yeah, he was married for 14 years, I think, and I think during that time it was when his parents were alive. So yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody. To be continued in different contexts, but ethical will is a great idea. All right, thank you, Shanti. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Florence. Great to see you all.